spirits to come over, then they're on this side.
Moving forward on the ritualistic timeline of America, we find a massive blood sacrifice, plotted and carried out by the deep state globalist cabal, invoking the magic, once again, of Aleister Crowley. Most Americans probably have no inclination that the events of September 11th, 2001 were a web of magic blood rituals, finely crafted and strategically woven with the goal of bringing about the new Aeon.
The events of 9/11/2001 were suffused with occult significance. The numbers that were inculcated into the event all had ties back to the occult in general and Aleister Crowley specifically. The numbers of the planes were 11, 93, 77, and 175. In Aleister Crowley's doctrines, 11 was the number of the new Aeon, but also the number of magic, as it fused in both the pentagram and the hexagram. So the first plane that hit the two twin towers, which also were an ideogram in the skyline of an 11, was plane 11. The second plane that hit the twin towers was 175, which is a ritual within Crowley's system about the God you adore. The number 77 was very important to Crowley. As we talked about earlier, it was the number of Babylon and the beast conjoined. So 77 plus 77. So 77 was important. It was also the number of Crowley's doctrine, Do What Thou Wilt on steroids, which is Liber Oz, his book 77, which dictates you can do what you want, and if anybody gets in your way, you're allowed to kill them. So that was 77. And then 93 were two numbers that are specific to Aleister Crowley. They represent two doctrines that are within his religion of Thelema, doctrines of agape and Thelema, both of which in the Kabbalah, in the specific subset of the Kabbalah, Gematria, if you add up the numbers of the letters, both add up to 93. So you can see those numerical signs in the events. The events of 9/11, which were pregnant with meaning and created great change in the world, which would be consistent with Crowley's definition of magic, which is to create change in the world in conformance with your will. These two monolithic buildings, the Twin Towers, were both 110 stories tall. And they also set against the skyline a huge 11, which to Crowley wasn't just a number, but also an ideogram, meaning these two different things had something. It was the symbolizing of the union of opposites, which is a very important doctrine within the occult, where two opposites come together and create something new. So those two twin towers were also referenced back to the two pillars that were in the original temple at Jerusalem, Boaz and Jachin. These two pillars that actually had occult significance. They both related to two different things, but they're also related to the pillars of Hercules, which means that that event in an occult context, the September 11th event, 2001, was a doorway to a new world, a new Aeon, if you will. And that whole event can be correlated to a Wicker Man type of event where people were put in, not to their knowledge, but as a human sacrifice, turned to ash in the creation of a future world of chaos and war, just like it was said in Crowley's Book of the Law.
Interestingly, back in 2005, while the wounds of 9/11 were still fresh, George W. Bush made reference to this new order of the ages declared by our nation's founders. And he specifically stated that they were acting on an ancient hope that was meant to be fulfilled. If nothing else, this was a reference to the occult prophecies of this revived Babylon, this destined continent of occult enlightenment. But could the 9/11 ritual of the new Aeon have any connection to all of this beginning to be fulfilled? Some researchers wholeheartedly believe that Bush's comments were a public declaration that the rituals of 9/11 had indeed begun this new order of the ages, or in the Crowleyan style language, the new Aeon.
We have confidence because freedom is the permanent hope of mankind, the hunger in dark places, the longing of the soul. When our founders declared a new order of the ages, when soldiers died in wave upon wave for a union based on liberty, when citizens marched in peaceful outrage under the banner Freedom Now, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled. History has an ebb and flow of justice, But history also has a visible direction set by liberty and the author of liberty. When the Declaration of Independence was first read in public and the Liberty Bell was sounded in celebration, a witness said it rang as if it meant something. In our time, it means something still. America in this young century proclaims liberty throughout all the world and to all the inhabitants thereof. Renewed in our strength, tested but not weary, we are ready for the greatest achievements in the history of freedom.
Continuing on the trail of occult rituals of our great nation, we find a bizarre series of events, including pedophilia and a strange archaic practice known as spirit cooking. These events have made the headlines through the Clinton Podesta email leaks. Once again, we find high levels of government-sponsored occultists exercising Crowleyan magic, leaving their marks on society with things that are so profane, we couldn't believe it had we not had substantial red-handed proof.
As soon as spirit cooking entered into the public eye, photos were leaked showing a wide range of high-profile guests involved in these cannibalistic dinner parties. Marina Abramovic has made many rounds with celebrities and politicians as a type of spiritual guru or witch who is said to have some type of radiant energy she can impart by gazing into one's soul. It's not shocking that she has ties to Hillary Clinton, who some claim is a practicing witch and necromancer and possible channel for Hilarion.
John Podesta, of course, his brother went to some rather bizarre spiritual types of activities that were very occultic, certainly demonic, I would argue, where blood and semen and breast milk and so forth were involved by this so-called performance artist, and this was well publicized in the last couple of years. Even in their own homes, the art reportedly is of a very unsavory flavor for the average person to behold. You have these types of activities that profile someone that is rather frightening and evil, I would argue, as a lot of globalists would seem to fit that description.
Also in the WikiLeaks email, there were images of John Podesta flashing hand symbols with the number 14, the number of pieces that Set chopped Osiris into, and a fish on his other hand, which is the animal that ate the phallic 14th piece of Osiris, his corpse, his male organ. These are symbols that occultists directly connect to necromantic rituals that occultists like Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, Freemasons, and evidently Hillary staffers employ during sex magic ceremonies for one purpose: to raise or to summon Osiris, Apollo, the spirit that the Bible says will be incarnate within the Antichrist.
Whether it's seances in the White House from Lincoln to Reagan, maniacal rites of the elite, or even ritual-based observances sold to the public, America is truly fulfilling the ancient prophecies, leaving no stone unturned. But the great ritual of the ages that is yet to come is not only the pinnacle of high-level Freemasonry, but it is the capstone event, tying together the prophecies of the end of the age from all the major religions and belief systems. It is the ritual that would ignite the resurrection of the Antichrist. The raising of the Osiris will be the greatest harnessing of Luciferic energy the world has ever seen. And when Osiris rises, the end is near.
When the Mason learns that the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of living power, he has learned the mystery of his craft. The seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands, and before he may step onward and upward, he must prove his ability to properly apply energy.
Applying the seething energies of Lucifer is indeed what they had in mind as they built the city of DC as a massive Masonic ritual site, illuminated in the seasonal light of the Isis-Osiris star Sirius, and filled with demonically charged architecture, idols, and magic street layouts, ultimately setting the table for the coming main event ritual, the raising of the final Osiris to rule the unified world kingdom. The goal of a unified world kingdom isn't anything new. And as a matter of fact, Bible prophecy foretold a specific order of kingdoms that would come leading up to the final kingdom of Antichrist. And as Solomon said, there is nothing new under the sun.
You have to go back to Daniel's prophecy of the four kingdoms. There was Babylon, the Medes and Persians, Greece, and Rome. 4 world kingdoms prophesied. All of these played out exactly as it was foretold and was being fulfilled as Rome, the 4th kingdom on the list, was dominating the world while John was on Patmos. The Lord gave him the word to connect and pick up where Daniel left off. In Revelation 17:10 it says, "There are 7 kings, 5 are fallen and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space." Each of the 7 kings have a kingdom associated with them.
Daniel gives us 4 kingdoms. The 2 prior world kingdoms that took place before the time of his prophecy were Egypt and Assyria, which makes Rome the 6th kingdom of the 7 mentioned in Revelation 17. This kingdom was currently in power when the revelation was given to John. Rome was a political, religious superpower of that day. Rome had the spirit of Antichrist, which is also known as the spirit of Babylon. You see, they were persecuting the people of God and leading the culture into spiritual fornication through idolatry. Peter confirms this idea in his epistles when he writes them from the church at Babylon, while actually being in Rome. This was a replay of the past Babylonian system while foreshadowing the final system to come, all maintaining that great horse spirit of Babylon.
Now the king that is yet to come is the one that will rule the prophesied 7th and final kingdom. This king will die by the sword according to Revelation 13. Simply put, this king will be assassinated and his death will be mourned worldwide. We're talking about a world political leader who has amassed unprecedented works in globalization and peace. One who has labored in bringing about change and breaking down the walls of political and religious division. So yes, when he is assassinated, the world will mourn his death. But then, in a miraculous resurrection back to life, he will be reanimated by the entity that ascends out of the bottomless pit. Revelation 17:8 explains this as the beast that was and is not and yet is. So he was alive, then dead, then alive again. It's through this supernatural resurrection, when the entity from the bottomless pit possesses this 7th king's dead body, that he becomes the 8th and final king, known as the Antichrist. This kingdom of the Antichrist is being built and revived today, with the majority of its policies in force being legislated and framed in our very own Washington, D.C.
How many people know that a tomb for the resurrection of Antichrist has already been prepared for his raising, and it lies beneath the U.S. Capitol dome? The United States Capitol crypt, it's a large circular room filled with 40 neoclassical Doric columns directly beneath the United States Capitol Rotunda. As all mystic rabbis and Freemasons understand, the number 40 has great significance throughout the Torah, the Talmud, the mystery schools, because the number 40 represents transition or change, the concept of renewal, a new beginning. Rabbis say the number 40 has the power to lift the world into a new spiritual state. So consider how Noah's flood represented the end of one age and the birth of a new one, and it lasted for 40 days. Moses was on Mount Sinai for 40 days and came down with the stone tablets that set the rules for a new order. But according to Mackey's authoritative encyclopedia of Freemasonry, 40 is the number of days of mourning in Assyria, Phoenicia, and Egypt to commemorate the death and the burial of their sun god, as well as the period in the festivals of the resurrection of Osiris. So consider that the U.S. Capitol crypt was built originally to offer a secret entrance to a coffer that they call Washington's tomb, that's stationed next to a repository of 13 statues of the National Statuary Hall collection. Of course, the number 13 is not coincidental. It's sacred to Freemasons as the number of Osiris and his future resurrection. Revelation 13:3 describes the head of the beast being wounded unto death. Then the whole world marvels when the beast is healed and rises from the dead. In this mockery of the death and resurrection of Christ, I suggest that the most fitting place on earth for the Antichrist body to lie in state will be in the tomb of Washington beneath the floor of the Capitol Dome. Why? Because the rotunda of the dome is where deceased presidents, celebrated commanding officers, even celebrated private citizens, like recently the Reverend Billy Graham, lay in state beneath the magic 72 pentagrams and the apotheosis of George Washington, America's first Osiris, to be translated into the kingdom of Osiris. But until now, nobody has laid directly beneath the rotunda in the Capitol crypt that was, according to authoritative Freemasons, prepared for America's Osiris. There is therefore no other more appropriate place for a United States president or a celebrated global leader to be placed for viewing. It was prepared and has been in waiting specifically for the magic ceremony that will give rise to the beast of Revelation. On his death, Antichrist will be placed in this magic coffer designed by Freemasons, and the 33rd degree Scottish Rite members will come there to perform the raising ceremony. Through Masonic alchemy, presidential apotheosis, that is, the leader of the United States, America's Pharaoh, being transformed into a god within the Capitol Dome or the womb of Isis in sight of the obelisk of Osiris, or the Washington Monument to those who Masons call profane, the uninitiated, actually began with America's first and most revered president, Master Freemason George Washington. In fact, Masons in attendance at Washington's funeral in 1799 cast sprigs of acacia or evergreen to symbolize both Osiris's resurrection and Washington's imminent resurrection in the realm where Osiris presides. Now, according to this Masonic enchantment, Osiris, Horus, was rising within a new president in D.C. as Washington took his role as Osiris of the underworld. Now, that's further assimilated and symbolized by the three-story design of the Capitol building. Freemasons point out how the Great Pyramid of Giza was made up of three main chambers to facilitate Pharaoh's transference to Osiris, just as the Temple of Solomon was a three-sectioned tabernacle made up of the ground floor, the middle chamber, and the Holy of Holies. The U.S. Capitol building is therefore designed with three stories: Washington's tomb, the crypt, and the rotunda, capped by a dome. Each floor has significant esoteric meaning regarding apotheosis, and the so-called tomb of Washington is empty, has been since construction. So we have to ask ourselves, why didn't they just clear this area out and use it if Washington was its intended corpse, but refused to use the facility? The official narrative is that a legal issue kept the government from placing Washington's body there. However, just as the tomb of Jesus Christ was emptied before his ascension, Washington is not in his tomb because he was never meant to be. He was the forerunner, the John the Baptist sent to prepare the way for a Messiah, while he himself traveled to the home of Osiris, as depicted high overhead in the dome, in the womb of Isis, in the apotheosis of George Washington.
When you visit Washington, D.C., and you tour the Capitol building, the religion and the beliefs of the founders and proliferators of this great nation are clearly depicted in the apotheosis of George Washington. As you look up into the underbelly of the Capitol Dome, seeing the heaven that George Washington is entering into, there are absolutely no Christian symbols depicted whatsoever. Jesus isn't there. Michael isn't there. There are no scriptures there, but rather you see Washington surrounded by demonic gods and goddesses of the ancient world, including Vulcan, of course, who Manly P. Hall says is the god that fills the Freemasons' hands with the seething powers of Lucifer. This is the heaven that George Washington is rising up into, inside the dome of the U.S. Capitol building. This is the heaven that the prominent founders believed in.
Interestingly, the term apotheosis of George Washington literally means the deification or glorification of George Washington. He has been deified into the heavens of the old gods, the gods worshipped by our nation's founders and forerunners, the very gods indeed of the ancients who prophesied of this Western continent being the future philosophic empire of the world.
In the context of the Capitol Dome and the 72 stars that circle Washington's apotheosis in the womb of Isis, the significance of that symbolism is very, very important because in sacred literature, including the Bible, stars are symbolic of angels. And within Masonic Gnosticism, 72 is the number of the fallen angels or cosmocrators, reflected in the 72 conspirators that controlled Osiris's life in Egyptian myth. These are the same entities that currently administer the affairs of earth, according to experts in the study of the divine council, that believe that, beginning at the Tower of Babel, the world and its inhabitants were disinherited by the sovereign God of Israel and placed under the authority of 72 angels, which became corrupt and disloyal to God. But these beings quickly became worshipped on earth as gods following Babel, and they were led by Osiris, Apollo. So, consistent within the traditions, the designers of the Capitol Dome, the Great Seal of the United States, and the obelisk Washington Monument circled the apotheosis of Washington with 72 pentagrams, dedicated the obelisk 72 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and placed 72 stones on the Great Seal's uncapped pyramid, above which the Eye of Horus, Osiris, Apollo stares. Those three sets of 72, combined with the imagery and occult numerology of the Osiris obelisk, the Isis dome, and the oracular Great Seal, are richly symbolic of the influence of Satan and his angels over the world, with a prophecy toward Satan's final earthly empire, the coming Novus Ordo Seclorum, or the new golden pagan age. Now, in order for the inevitable worship of Osiris to be reestablished on earth, the 72 demons that govern the nations have to be controlled, and therefore they're set in magical constraints on the Great Seal, the Washington obelisk, and the pentagram circles around the apotheosis of Washington in order to bind and force the desired effect according to the esoteric beliefs of the Freemasons and other occultists. In The Secret Destiny of America, Manly P. Hall noted as well that the 72 stones of the pyramid on the Great Seal correspond to the 72 arrangements of the Tetragrammaton, or the four-lettered name of God in Hebrew. Those four letters can be combined in 72 combinations that result in what is called the Shimhamporish, which represents in turn the laws, the powers, the energies of nature, according to the Masonic occultists. So the idea that the mystical name of God could be invoked to bind or loose these supernatural agents, or the powers and energies of nature, as Hall called them, is very meaningful creed inside many occult tenets, including Kabbalah and Freemasonry. And that is why the 72 stars are pentagram shaped around the deified Freemason George Washington. Medieval books of magic, or grimoires, such as the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon, not only identify the star systems Orion, which is Osiris, and Pleiades, which is Apollo, as the home of these powers, but apply great importance to the pentagram shape of the stars for binding and loosing their influence.
So the city of DC has been intentionally designed for occult rituals from the ground up, and it was strategically built with elements already in place for the resurrection ritual of the coming Osiris, the final world pharaoh. The unused crypt of George Washington, demonically charged with symbols and magic, seems to be waiting for the dead body of the Antichrist to be placed, while the entity from the bottomless pit will be conjured up by the Freemasons to take possession of this king, right in the midst of the U.S. Capitol Dome, the womb of Isis. The table has been set for some time now, awaiting the final fulfillment of the ancient esoteric prophecies, as well as the biblical prophecies of the coming philosophic empire and its supernatural world king. It isn't by chance that the United States is heralding world peace and globalization, posing as the world superpower, forcing the spreading of democracy, the very political vision of the ancient mystic philosophers. There truly isn't a more fitting location or nation for this empire to be, and for the world king to rise from. So could it be that Washington, D.C. is the great whore of Babylon who sits on many waters? Revelation 17 says the whore is a city, and the many waters that she sits on are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So I challenge you to show me one nation on earth that is made up of such multitudes of people, nations, and tongues, more so than the United States of America. This is the personification of the American creed, e pluribus unum, one out of many. We are one nation formed out of the vast and culturally diverse nations and tongues of the earth. Coupled together with the history, the rituals, and esoteric revival that has taken place on our soil, there is literally no place more fitting to be the fulfillment of the Whore of Babylon.
The Whore of Babylon, that end-time city, also sits upon 7 mountains or 7 hills, according to Revelation 17. Most scholars point to Rome when considering the city on 7 hills, but perhaps they're looking at the wrong Rome. Washington, D.C. was not only built on the pre-American land known as Rome, Maryland, but was also built on 7 hills. A new Rome, a revived Roman Empire, fueled by the spirit of Babylon, that would influence and lead the world in the last days' worship of the beast, the 7th and final kingdom to rule them all.
The ancient pagan prophets and philosophers foretold of this great Western continent that would lead the world in a last days philosophic empire, where the mystery occult religions would resurface into the mainstream.
The secret societies have preserved and practiced these ancient esoteric beliefs.
The deep state executes the agenda on the world stage.
The rituals invoke the entities, bringing about an atmospheric change.
All of this preparing the way for the great conjuring, the resurrection of Osiris, Apollyon, the final world king, the Antichrist. And this Luciferian secret destiny is undoubtedly being fulfilled right here in America, in the belly of the beast.
There's a private redwood forest reported to be a meeting place for the most powerful men on earth. 2 weeks out of the year they meet in seclusion, discussing who will be the next president and mastermind ideas to keep people in the dark about these illusions, confusing the mass populace with the idea that freedom still somehow exists, and making us think that we need elected puppets to control the things we simply cannot fix. The creation of false threats and controlled opposition they call terrorism. A mission to put America into submission under the thumb of Big Brother who's come to protect us from evil Muslim terrorists and health threats, maintaining our protection by injecting us with drugs and taking naked pictures of us every time we fly out of airports. How many more lives will it take? How many more rights will be taken away in the name of safety and protection before we stand up and take side with the fact that we should be willing to fight to live lives without a fear of government intervention? A united shout in the midst of this darkness, pounding our fists in the jailhouse doors of this so-called democracy, while these rich fools get drunk and run around redwood trees, secretly burning human effigies. The so-called Republican right, the liberal left, and the moderates. Many are involved in the worshiping of Molech and these evil deeds, and paying honor to pagan deities during their cremation of care ceremony. Okay, calm down. People are gonna think I'm crazy. Let me lay it out straight, because now I'm getting emotional, which is secret group, which consequently grew to include many of the richest, most powerful men on earth, presidents too. Those who are in the loop and make decisions that affect me and you. Just investigate these things, try and refute it to see if it's really true. They originally gave tribute to a 50-foot Buddha statue, which has now been removed and reduced to a 40-foot pagan owl. Want proof? Look at the bird's eye view, blatantly laid out in the U.S. Capitol. Zoom into the corner of the $1 bill to see their owl symbol, or in the logo of the National Press Club, corrupted with the blood spilled by murderous worshippers of Molech, aristocrats of many varieties, blasphemous, fiendish mercenaries, nefarious Luciferians, bent on a new world order, believing mankind can muster up the power to usher themselves into some sort of Aquarian age, using the live evolution to manage a new stage of elevated transhumanism, based in DNA manipulation and pineal gland activation, opening demonic portholes and gateways. The Jack Parsons of today, preparing their large hadron collider Stargate to initiate contact with entities outside our time and space domain, imitating aliens and agreeing to be seen as anything needed in order to corrupt and profane our brains and keep us enslaved, maintain the lie until the very end of days.